Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Svenja and I'm a knitter, and here on YouTube I talk a lot about knitting and am recently into vlogging some of my making adventures. So I thought it'd be really fun to do a week's worth of vlogging to show you a little bit more kind of behind the scenes of what I actually do day to day in terms of my crafting. So I'm primarily a knitter, as you can probably tell from this channel, but recently have gotten back into some sewing. So I have a few projects to talk about today, and I have them all here with me. If you've been following along, you might know that I am primarily knitting socks this summer as a way to just become a better sock knitter. I'm committing to trying out like different patterns and techniques, just to gain some more experience as a sock knitter. So I have completed 4 pairs of socks, which I'll share with you today. And then I have some sock yarn and a new little sock project bag that I made that I'm really excited to share with you. So for sock knitting this summer, I'm participating in the Crazy Sock Lady's summer sock camp, and I'm actually wearing one of her shirts. I thought it'd be really fun to support her, and kind of say thank you for putting on a make along, which I know is a lot of work. I don't know if you can tell or see really clearly here, but the logo has a lot of different fun summer scenes and some like knitting graphics. I really love this shirt. And I picked this like blue tie-dye background because I felt like it was so reminiscent of like summertime and summer camp as a child. So I've been wearing it all the time, and yeah, sock knitting has been really fun so far. Like I said, I've gotten a few pairs already done, and I've shared a few of them on both my Instagram and through my channel here, but I won't bore you with all the details. I do try to go into the details a little bit more when I do my podcast, but for the sake of vlogging, I thought I'd just share with you some of the socks I've already finished. So these were my very first pair here. These are the Frill socks by Summer Lee Designs. She's one of my favorite sock knitwear designers, and I love this pattern. I think it's just a great fitting pair of socks. I really love the little frill cuff. It makes it really, really fun. And then just a basic stockinette sock, which really highlights this beautiful yarn. This is Emma's yarn in her Practically Perfect sock base. Beautiful yarn. I will definitely knit this pattern again. I think the 1x1 ribbing up here just makes it for a nice like fitting sock around your ankle. I really struggle with getting a loose enough cast on for a good pair of like ankle socks, so like they're not too tight around my ankle, and this really does the trick. So these are the first pair that I finished. I think it took me about like a week and a half to finish these. The second pair here is a pair of DK weight socks. I used the DK vanilla sock pattern by Crazy Sock Lady. It's a free pattern. It's a great written pattern, very easy to understand. I don't think I followed the pattern exactly in terms of knitting the like the amount of rows for the leg before transitioning to the heel. I was really hoping to get 2 pairs of socks out of this one skein, and I think I have enough left over to do another pair of shorties. This is Malabrigo Arroyo. I'm just not sure what color. There's a few different colorways that are very similar, and I threw out the label, and I also can't distinguish like what it really is on the computer screen, so I don't want to tell you it's a certain colorway and then it's not, but it's got these really beautiful like purpley jewel tone colors, and I'm thinking about putting these aside as like a early Christmas gift for my mother-in-law who loves my socks, and these colors are right up her alley. So I haven't worn these yet, so I'm thinking just put them aside and get on the holiday knitting, or get ahead of the holiday knitting is what I want to say. All right, so next pair of socks that I finished are these little stripy, scrappy socks, which are they're so cute. I love how they turned out. I was really hoping to work on a jogless round with stripes, which I've struggled with in the past, and then also do a afterthought heel. So that was kind of the point of making these socks. This yarn is all scraps from some of the yarn that I dyed a few years ago, so it was really fun to see kind of how it worked up. The only yarn that is not dyed by me is this purple yarn that I used, this one here at the cuff. This is a Knit Picks tonal, I think it's Stroll. So yeah, I did not use a specific pattern for these. I just kind of cast on my normal sock recipe, which is 64 stitches for the cuff. And I did just about an inch of 2x2 ribbing. And then I knit a total of 8, I think it was 8, yeah. 8 stripes that had 8 rows each before like switching to the next color. And then sorry if you can hear that, my neighbor's doing some yard work. So I knit, that might be really distracting. I'm sorry if that's distracting, but we're just going to continue. So 8 rows of 8 stripes of 8 rows of each color. And then I knit my 1 row of waste yarn, and then I did the same exact thing on the bottom. So 8 stripes of 8 rows each. So 64 rows total before decreasing for the toe. And I wear like a 7.5 size shoe. I have a pretty wide foot, and these socks fit really nicely. So in terms of the jogless, let's see if I can show this to you up close here. I don't know if you can tell. Obviously, here's the line for the fold. Get the camera to focus. There are a lot of different like YouTube videos or techniques out there that talk about this technique. So I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but what I basically did was on the row before I was about to change the color, I started to kind of like weave in the next color as I was knitting, and then when I got to the stitch where I would change the color, I picked up the right leg of the stitch from the row before and knit it together with the new color, and that kind of just like brings that last row up. It shifts it a little bit and therefore makes the transition between the colors a little bit smoother. And I think I can tell just a little bit where the change is, but it's a lot better than I've done in the past. So I'm really happy with that. The inside here, you can kind of see all my different like scraps weaved in. And I really like this kind of like weave in as you go technique. A lot of people have talked about this. I did go ahead and like weave in the rest of the end kind of through a lot of the stitches. I feel like that just helps it to stay in place, especially with lots of wear and tear. And I'm hoping to wear these socks a lot. So yeah. In terms of the colors, I really wanted them to look sort of matched, like a matched pair, but not completely. So I had a little bit of a strategy when I knit these. So obviously the cuff and the toe matches and the heels match. But what I did was I knit 2 rows of each color and spaced them out sort of like one on the top part and then one on the bottom. So they're, you know, spaced somewhat evenly. Like if you can see this orangey one, there's one on the top, one on the bottom here. Same with this sock here. I think there's only one color that I did once because I only had a little bit of yarn left. Yeah, it's this blue, like blue speckled one right here in the middle. So they are definitely scrappy, but they're also a little bit matchy-matchy, which I like. Yeah, and in terms of the afterthought heel, I did follow a technique that I had talked about on my part 2 of my sock series. And that really helps. The technique talks through how to get like a really good fitting afterthought heel. And then I really don't know why I'm wearing this sock in my hands like this. Yeah, the tutorial talks through how to get a good fitting afterthought heel, and then also how to avoid the little gaps on the sides when picking up the heel. And I'll show you that in a second. But the tutorial had you knit 4 rows before even starting to decrease for the heel, and this really made for a nice fitting heel. I'm pleasantly surprised, actually. And in terms of the little gaps, you can see there's no gap. Well, maybe a little bit of a gap on that side. It's really minimal. On one of the socks, it's a little bit more noticeable. Yeah, it's this one right here. So a little bit more of a gap right here, but I think it has to do with how like tightly I wove in the end. So maybe I can just go back and, okay. Maybe we'll take a little bit of a break. Alrighty, I'm back, and I think it's quieted down a little bit. It's been nothing but raining here for like 5 or 6 weeks, so I feel like anytime there's like a few hours of sun, people just need to like get their lawns mowed, and I definitely don't blame my neighbor for wanting to get his yard work done. Yeah, it's been really odd weather this summer, very, very humid. Short spurts of sunshine here and there. I mean, our grass and plants and flowers are loving it, so I can't really complain there. But yeah, it's been an odd season so far. So anyways, back to my stripy socks here that I was talking about. I think I left off talking about the little hole in terms of where you pick up that afterthought heel. So this side here is the worst of it, but I think I can just go back in and tighten up the ends a little bit and fix that problem. So yeah, overall I had a lot of fun with these. It was really, really nice to see my stash in use. And again, this was a lot of yarn that I had dyed a few years ago, so it was really kind of cool to see all the colors blending together and how they all knit up together. So very pleased with these. I'll probably make another pair. I definitely have plenty of stash yarn to use, and I think these would make a really fun gift as well. They're just really unique, so very pleased with those. And then the last pair that I have, I just finished these, and they just dried yesterday actually after blocking them. So these are them here. I'm sorry I'm not showing you these socks on blockers, but once they block, I just like to take them off and like fold them up and admire them. So these are them. These are, the pattern is called Wild Flowers and Honeycomb Socks, and the pattern is by This Handmade Life. Show you them up close and personal here. They've got this really pretty eyelet lace design here, and then this really nice textured heel, which I'd never done a heel like that before, but I was really pleased with how they came out. So this is a top-down sock pattern. I used Magic Loop. The pattern was super easy to memorize once you knit a few rows here. The pattern did not share like how many rows to knit here, but I basically followed what the sample looked like. Yeah, I think these are like darling socks. I love little eyelets. I think they're so sweet and summery. This is a skein of fingering weight that I dyed again a couple years ago. I had in my stash. I was learning how to dye yarn, and I remember like mixing up this color here. It's definitely a tonal. It's not a good. It's not a total solid color. So if you look closely, you can see a little variation in the yarn. It doesn't bother me, but I definitely think this type of pattern would look better in like a solid color. You can't obviously see the tonal if from far away, but just a thought. Yeah, and no complaints, no concerns. I did a 3x1 ribbing here instead of the twisted rib. I just don't really love twisted rib if I don't have to do it, so I ignored that in the pattern and just went ahead and did my own thing, and I really like how they came out, and they're fitting well as well. I'm a little curious to see how the heel will wear with the texture there. It's a lot of like slipped stitches, but then again, like the base of the heel, I forget what this is actually called, like the terminology for that part in the sock, but that's, you know, obviously stockinette, so I'm sure that will wear fine, but we'll see how the slipped stitches hold up over time. So yeah, that is my fourth pair so far, so I'm pretty pleased with my progress on sock making. I have a few skeins of sock yarn that I wanted to share with all of you. So the first skein here, and I'm thinking a pair of like textured socks in this. So this is new to my stash here. This is from the Sheepy Shire, which is a indie dyer. I forget where she's located, but her colorways are just gorgeous. I mean, look at that. I don't know if the camera's really doing this justice, but so many fun different colors in there. Very summery. This is in the shade Sidewalk Chalk, and this is her staple sock base, which is a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and there's 460 skeins, so a very standard sock weight skein. So yeah, I'm thinking like a pair of textured socks. I would love to make them full length. I'm making a pair of shorties right now, so I think the next pair will be a full length. And I'm thinking I might use some like contrast yarn for the cuff and the toe, maybe the heel as well if I have enough. I think I have a little bit of something that will match this. I'm really loving that like purple that pops through. It's like a just bright cheery purple, and then like all those pastels, definitely reminiscent of chalk, and I did a lot of Sidewalk Chalk as a kid, so loved the skein. I had to order it. I got this off of Etsy and it shipped really quickly. I'm really happy with that. And then I have two skeins of self-striping yarn, which is something I've never worked with before. When I started this whole sock knitting journey, I was really anxious to try out some self-striping yarn. So I did a lot of research. I had a hard time like narrowing down who I actually wanted to order from. I definitely wanted to support kind of small business. I didn't want to use like a commercial-based yarn, just for the sake of you know, kind of making this a nice experience and supporting someone else that dyes yarn, is in this field here. So I don't know if that made any sense, but I'm really excited to cast on some socks. So I have two skeins. This one is the first here. This is Nomadic Yarns, and this is in the Trusty Sock Base, which is 462 yards of 75% merino, 25% nylon, and this is in the color Reading Rainbow. It's just all these really beautiful colors. I really liked the sample that I saw. Love these kind of colors together. And then the second skein is by Freckled Whimsy. It's also a hand dyer. This is a sock set, and it's in the Serendipity base, which is another 25% nylon blend, 460 yards, and this is in the shade Tropic Like It's Hot, with this little accent mini skein. I think it's a 20-gram skein. It feels like that. Yeah. And again, like, how fun are those colors? It's just so summery, very tropical. I just thought this would be a perfect pair of like summery socks. In terms of patterns, obviously you can use whatever patterns you want for self-striping yarn. It doesn't really matter, but I think I'm gonna do some research and figure out how to get socks that will be matching. I think it's just a matter of like winding it into the right place within the skein to kind of pull at the same rate, or like when you first start the sock, making sure the colors match. So I don't think it will be too hard, but I definitely want to make sure that they are matching for the most part. It doesn't matter that much, but I think for the sake of like learning how to use self-striping yarn, I should go ahead and do my due diligence. So yeah, that's it for some new yarn, and I'm gonna go ahead and work a little bit more on my Good morning. It is another work day and I'm up and enjoying some coffee on the porch and some knitting before I have to go back in for the day. I'm sure you can probably hear the birds. They're so nice. They actually might be really loud for filming outside, but we're just gonna roll with it. I want to update you a little bit on what I've been making this week. So I finished my shorties. I love them. They're so cute. This yarn is gorgeous. So this is a pattern basically adjusted from the I'm So Basic sock pattern. I talk a lot about this pattern. I think it's just a really great standard top-down sock pattern. It is written by Summerly Designs, and all I did was basically alter the length of the leg here. So I cast on 64 stitches, and I think I knit maybe a total of like 10 or 12 rows before starting the heel, and then it's just basic stockinette all the way down to the toe. And for this toe I actually did a little bit of a different toe, and potentially I could show it to you here. So it's a lot more rounded than I typically do. It's hard because it's now blocked But that is what the toe looks like. And I actually have, let's show you here. This is a standard square toe. So you can see the difference here, that this is a lot more rounded. This is incredibly hard to show on camera, but toe decreases to get a rounded toe. It's all about the rate of the decrease, and it has to do with how quickly those decreases are building upon each other to create that rounded toe. So what I did was I decreased and then I spaced out the rows in between at an interval that was, I believe I did 4 rows, decrease, 3 rows, decrease, 2 rows, decrease, and then once I got down to the last row, I just decreased every row until I met my final kind of stitch count for the bind off, which is 12 stitches for this toe. So that's kind of how I did that. I know that wasn't a great explanation, but I really do love how these are fitting, and I do love a good rounded toe. So I think I'll probably use this recipe, we'll say, for future socks as well. This yarn, and I'm going to show it to you here in the ball, get the label as well. So here's the rest of the cake. So I have enough for probably another pair of shorties. What I'll probably do is I will weigh this pair and see how much yarn I used, and kind of based on what I have left, I may just like choose to knit the like body of the sock and then use some scrap yarn for like a different colored heel, cuff and toe. So kind of depending on, I think I might have enough left to just do about that. It's hard to feel and like estimate how much I have left, but I think that's probably what the situation is. So this yarn is Marianthe Yarns. This is the label here. I hope I'm saying that right. She's actually a dyer out of Germany. I was really excited to work with this yarn. I'm just really impressed with how she dyes such even speckles. Like, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just really impressive to get hand-dyed yarn to look that even with all those different colors of speckles. And this yarn is incredibly soft. It is a 85% merino superwash and 15% nylon blend. And this was a full skein, like a 400 meter skein. So loving these. They fit really nicely. I might add a little pom-pom on the heel here. Summerly Designs has a like Pom Squad sock design, which is basically like a shorty with a little pom attached to the heel. I think that would be really cute, but probably not the most functional if I'm going to wear these. So I'm thinking about maybe making it like removable. Not quite sure how I would do that, but it could be an option. So really, really loving these. They knit up super quick. Yeah. So those were the pair I recently finished, and then I went ahead and cast on another pair in my self-striping yarn, which this is now what the cake looks like because I obviously caked it up, or this what the skein looked like. This is Freckled Whimsy Tropic Like It's Hot, and this is what the yarn is looking like so far. So this is my first time working with self-striping yarn, which is kind of crazy. I've just never had the right opportunity or felt the need to buy a self-striping skein, but it's been a lot of fun. And this actually came with a mini as well. I think it's about 20 grams, and that's the contrasting mini. So I am working these toe up. These are also my first pair of toe up socks, which is exciting. I learned Judy's Magic Cast On for the cast on, and then this is just a square toe here. I'm using a pattern, it's a free pattern by Tanis Fiber Arts, and that's basically a standard toe-up sock pattern intended for self-striping yarn. So it takes into account like when you might stop for the heel. Because I'm knitting these toe-up, I have a little bit more control of like how much yarn I'm going to be using. So what I did was I actually split the skein into 2 matching mini like half skeins, so I can more or less knit this until I run out of yarn, which is my intent. I really hate having like scraps, and I don't know what I would do with a lot of leftover self-striping yarn scraps. So I think what I'll probably do is use a afterthought heel for these, and then just kind of knit these as long as I have left and see how long of a sock I can make. I'm loving how these colors are knitting up. This just screams summer to me. I don't know if you agree, but those are just really, really fun colors. And it's really, really fun to see how the colors like are coming up in the skein. There's very little difference in how the colors change. I know you can see there's just like a little bit in between the stripes there as the colors shift, but you really can't tell a difference. So very, very happy with this so far. I'm keeping this project in this project bag here, and I'll talk a little bit about these bags that I've been making. So I'm very much a beginner sewist. I learned to sew many, many years ago. I do pick it up from time to time to make little projects. I don't tend to like stick with it necessarily like I do knitting. But this year, as I was knitting socks this summer, I really wanted like a few little project bags to keep my individual sock projects in. So this is one of the first bags I made. So it's kind of like a two-toned quilted bag. I don't know if you can see the quilted like pattern on it. This is the other side. I picked like a really cute little camping fabric. We do a lot of camping in the summer. We have like a little travel trailer. So I wanted something a little bit reminiscent of that. And then I used like a little contrasting fabric for the inside. Whoops. And it's got a little drawstring on it, so it just kind of comes together like that. And it holds, I'd say, a full sock project. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I could probably fit 2 skeins of yarn in here easily. Yeah. So like 2 projects. I'm not really following a specific pattern for this per se. I found like a few little tutorials on making a drawstring bag because I hadn't done that before, but the measurements I just kind of made up based on like how much room I wanted for individual sock projects. So I showed you that I made this one a few days ago. So cute little like cooking design, same concept like the two-tone, and here's the contrasting inside, and it's got a layer of like fusible fleece in there. I might next time I make one of these add a little bit of a thicker layer just so it gives it a little bit more like oomph. But so far they've been really durable. I really like how these are turning out. I have a lot more of this camping fabric, so I'm thinking I should make like a bigger one. And the next time I do this, I should probably add on like a little handle on the side, that way I can carry it. But right now this works, and I'm really loving this. So those are the projects that I'm working on right now. My summer of socks is going really well. I can't believe how many pairs I've actually made. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 5th pair. Yeah, I think this is my 5th pair. So my goal was really just to knit as many socks as I could with the intent of just like learning new techniques and adding to my sock knitting experience. So far, so well. So far, so good. So far, so well. I don't know. I think I need more coffee and some breakfast, and then I'm going to head off to work, and I will update you a little bit later on some more progress on my self-striping sock. Potentially I get a heel in today. So, alrighty, off I go. Bye. Alrighty, I just got home from another half day of working. It's kind of funny that I decided to vlog an entire week of making when I mostly worked. But I did get a lot of knitting done and then some sewing as well. So I think this week was pretty consistent with what I do on a regular basis in terms of making. I do knit pretty much every day, I would say, either for a few minutes before work or after. It's just my way to kind of calm down from the day, and I obviously snuck in a little bit of sewing this week, which is a little atypical for me, but I've been really into these project bags. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I do want to answer a few of the popular sock knitting questions I get. So I put a little like question poll on Instagram and have a few just typed up on my phone here that I figured that I would share. So the first question comes from a viewer that is asking for any tips on speeding up sock knitting. So I think this probably refers to like knitting speed in general, and maybe touches on how to like actually get a pair of socks finished. I think a lot of people get hung up on knitting the second sock, also called second sock syndrome. So for me, I knit all my socks using a magic loop technique, and I knit them on US size 1 ChiaoGoo needles, which I feel have the sharpest metal tip that I've found. And I think that really helps to speed up the rate of knitting because, especially with sock yarn, it's really thin, it can split easily. So I think having a really sharp tip helps to just kind of be able to naturally knit a little bit quicker. I also do knit continental style, so I think that probably speeds up the rate of knitting as well. I do have one tip though, in terms of being consistent with finishing socks. I do really try to make an effort to cast the second sock on immediately after finishing the first. So really trying to avoid any periods of time where there's not that sock on my needles. I feel like that just helps to encourage me to really work through the second one and avoid having those loose single socks floating around with no partner, which I'm guilty of. I have plenty of single socks. But I think those tips are probably the most useful for, I guess, finishing a pair of socks at a reasonable rate. The next question is what my recommended pattern would be for a first-time sock knitter. And I'm not gonna bore you with this. I've talked about this pattern in depth, but it's the I'm So Basic sock pattern by Summerlee Designs. It's a great pattern because it has a photo tutorial as well as a video component to it. So I think it's just a great comprehensive pattern that is really well written. It's also a really great fitting sock. It's what I made these little shorties from. I talked a lot about these already. But yeah, it's my favorite vanilla sock pattern. I think it's just a great resource, and it's also free, which is a great bonus to anyone who's looking to try sock knitting but nervous to get into it. This way you don't invest anything. You can just download the pattern. It's available on Ravelry, and that way you can just kind of take a peek at what the process of sock knitting looks like to see if it's something that you would want to try. And I do really encourage people to try knitting socks if they haven't. It's actually a lot easier than you might think. I know I was really intimidated at first. Just knitting with sock yarn in general can be intimidating. It's really thin yarn. They're really small needles, but your hands do really get used to it. And I think making socks is one of the best parts of knitting. I think it's really, really cool to see a pair of socks come to life, especially if you've made them yourself. The next question is, what sock blockers should I buy, or do you have any advice on what to avoid? So I actually pulled out my sock blockers, and I have two pairs. One is a plastic pair right here. These are from Knit Picks, and then these are like a metal pair. And oops, I think I got these off of, I'm actually not sure. I think they're an Amazon find. I use both of these interchangeably. I will say, in terms of buying sock blockers, I do think you should invest in like a plastic rigid pair. There are lots of wooden sock blockers out there, but when you're putting a wet sock onto a blocker, you really don't want that blocker to be changing this, like, its size, and wood technically will soak up fluid or water. So plastic is probably the best option in my opinion. I would actually prefer these ones over this metal kind because I've actually stretched or like manipulated this metal. See how it's kind of bendy? I don't know if you can really see that, but these rigid ones are just more consistent for sizing, and they're also available in different sizes. So I think a medium and a large. Medium is what I use for my foot size, or for socks that I knit myself, which is like I'm a US size, like 7.5. But I also do have a bigger pair that fits like a men's size. So nice that they're available in different sizes. So yeah, I would definitely avoid something wooden. I do have like a decorative wooden one that I kind of like just use as decoration. But I wouldn't, for like a functional sock blocker, choose a wooden sock blocker. So I hope that answers the question there. The next question is how to avoid gaps at the side of a gusset flap. So I've done a lot of personal research on this, and what this question is referring to is when you pick up stitches to eventually make a gusset, which is kind of this area here in the sock, you do have the risk of just picking up stitches along the heel flap and creating little holes. I don't know if you can, the camera will focus here. So typically right there, if you can see it. And there are a few strategies to use to try to minimize that hole. And the first one is when you are picking up your heel flap, I always actually pick up an extra stitch, more than what the pattern is calling for. And on the next round, I knit those two, like the extra stitch and the stitch before or after together, to kind of pull everything in and really tighten it up. So that's tip number one. And then tip number two is on the second row after picking up the heel flap, I actually knit those stitches through the back loop. And that way you're twisting the stitch that is basically connecting like the heel to the rest of the sock, and this area right here is where you would pick up. And by knitting it through the back loop, you're twisting that stitch and just causing a lot more, or not causing, but you're like pulling the yarn and making it more taut, therefore leading to kind of a better join. And I feel like those two tips together, I get a pretty consistent, you know, you can't really see it here. There's a little tiny little gap right here. But if I'm not stretching it out, you can't really notice it. Or maybe you can, but either way, it's not significant. It doesn't bother me. And these two methods that I use consistently produce kind of like even gussets without holes. Yeah, I hope those are helpful. Next question is, do you have any tips for a better fitting sock? I think this is a very personal question because everyone has a different sized foot or preference on how socks fit. I think generally speaking though, typically people's like their foot in this area of the sock is more narrow than their leg, like this part of the sock here. So what I've done in the past, and I have kind of tossed this question around to other knitters and they seem to agree, if you actually either reduce the stitches for the foot, I typically do no more than like 2 to 4 stitches, or sizing down a needle size helps to kind of tighten this entire area of the sock and therefore just overall make a better fitting sock. So that would be probably my number one recommendation. And then just knitting lots and lots of socks and trying out different techniques, different cast-ons, different toes. I really think that just more experience making socks helps you become a better sock knitter, which again is my intention this summer, is to really hone in on a lot of those different techniques. And I think I'm kind of like picking up my own preference for like bind offs, heels, toes, knitting styles. And I think just through more exposure and experience to sock knitting, I'm really creating like my ideal and best fitting sock. So I just encourage you to knit as many pairs as you can, try out different needles, different yarn. I think it's a very individual thing. And if you have any great tips, please do leave them in a comment. I would love to hear them. All right, moving on. The next question, I'll actually wrap things up here. So the last question is any tips for caring for hand knit socks? This is a great one because I do machine wash most of my socks because the sock yarn that I use is superwash. However, I found that by not putting them in the dryer, I feel like I can extend the life on the sock. I think drying either like felts a little bit of the yarn despite it being superwash yarn. I just feel like drying it flat really, or putting it back on a blocker, which I've done in the past, helps to really maintain the shape of the sock and then lead to kind of longer lasting socks. And it really all kind of depends on what fiber you're using, how you want to wear your sock, if you're willing to repair it if you have holes, which I am reluctant to do that. I just don't really have the patience. Although I really haven't worn any of my socks down to the point where I have like significant holes. So maybe I'll get there at some point. I do really cherish my socks, so I try not to wear them too much, although my goal is to wear them in more functional settings, like to and from work and just around the house. So maybe I'll have some future tips on that. So yeah. I've been knitting a little bit more on my striped sock, my self-striping yarn sock. It's going really nicely. I'll probably be able to finish the first sock tonight. But I'm actually going to go ahead and make another project bag. I have a little bit of fabric picked out that I thought would be fun to show you. It actually goes this way. So this is like a little baking fabric here, and I already cut out some squares. I'm going to make another project bag and potentially gift this to someone. So yeah, let's finish up there, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and if you have any thoughts on sock knitting, then please obviously leave a comment below, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye.